and expectant that that is going to happen, right? We are emotional beings. And so our flesh can sometimes get in the forefront of our truth. And so there are ways for us to not only take our thoughts captive, as we know biblically, but there's also some really great surefire ways that we're going to train you up in today that will be weapons of warfare for you when these things do come up naturally. We don't want to always blame the enemy on some of the things that will come up because we know that we're also responsible for some of them. And so it's just being able to communicate that well to ourselves, to others who are involved in the writing process, our families, and your publisher if you're working alongside us, because we definitely have some people who like to hide in their emotions. And we're like, hey, you're like 7 months behind deadline, just wondering how things are going. And, this is real. There's real life circumstances that happen. Things unfold unexpectedly, but sometimes it's just emotional turmoil and it keeps us locked outside of our launch date. And so we're thrilled to have you. The conversation that is going on today for those who are joining us later on the virtual training is Ink and Tears, Conquering the Unexpected Emotions of Authorship. And I have the joy of introducing you to our Fit Press director. Her name is Julianne Kirkland. Like I said, she is an OG to the community. She's been a loyal follower, and I have been the same for her. We've been on each other's podcasts. Many podcast swaps have happened. We've been on each other's stages. We both are conference hosts. She's a retreat host. She's a 2-time best-selling author, one of which, of course, is the Joyful Entrepreneur Anthology, which we'll talk a little bit about later. She's also a TEDx speaker, which is really awesome. As you know, there's some really neat coupling that can happen. Authors often want to be speakers. Speakers often want to be authors. And if they don't, as Rachel just recently learned, sometimes podcast comes into play and they don't want to be a podcaster, but we really encourage it. And by the time they're done with it, they realize that they were made for this. Fun story. She's also been a mastery trainer with Tony Robbins. So Julianne, super grateful to have you. And you're going to be hearing from her a lot today. So get excited. All right, Julianne, do you have anything you want to say? Want to say yo, what's up?
Hey-o. No, I'm just excited to be here. And whether you are live with us right now or you are watching the recording, be ready, be open, and take what you can right now, leave what is not working for you, because you might be able to come back to it later, right? And so that is what's so powerful about these trainings that we do live, and then you have access to them later as well. So.
And Julianne, show us your other book. I want everybody to get their hands on it if they haven't already.
This is the Rise and Shine.
It's pretty.
This
so
is the book, baby. And we will talk about this because it started as this one, and then I pulled it back and re-released it as this one. So, well, again, there's so much more than, I'm finished writing my book, I'm all done.
It's so true. That's so true. I'm excited to see that evolution that you guys are going to be able to witness. We'll probably have people just like jumping in throughout the time. So for those that are coming in, you are not ignored. We love you. We're so glad that you're here. But people's, schedules and babies and spouses and drop off and carpool all can sometimes inhibit us from being here right on the nose. So Janice, we see you come in. Christina, April, Sharia, we're excited you guys are here. Lydia's an OG to the virtual trainings. We're so grateful to have you here. And so let's get started. For those of you who are unaware of what and when Fit Press kind of came into fruition, it happened in 2021 alongside the Always Becoming book, which was my first solo authorship. I've got about 3 more in queue right now, one of which is like so close to complete. And I'm going to tell you how I'm going to finish it here soon. But this started as a self-published journey. And in that process, I realized the emotions of piecemealing together so many different contractors, if you will, right? I had to find the editor. I had to find the photographer. I had to find the formatter. I had to find how in the world do I even get this out onto Amazon? There were so many pieces to the puzzle, and I got burned a couple times from people I hired off of Fiverr. I had beta readers tell me that my book was terrible. I had an agent drop me. I had another agent that I had to drop. I had publishing houses that were like, yeah, this isn't going to fit the market. There's already something just like it out there. So the journey of becoming an author, imagine like all of the daggers that are going into your heart, and you're like, but God told me. And I stood on that word and I continued through, I pressed on. And when I had the opportunity to republish it in 2021, because it originally came out in 2019, Is that right? 2020? I don't even remember. 2 years before, 2020. I don't know. Anyway, it came out. It came out again. And when it came out, it was alongside Fit Press Publishing House because I realized I wanted to be a solution to the problem that so many self-published authors were having. And I wanted it to get full distribution. So it wasn't just on Amazon because as you probably learned in some of our other trainings, and if you haven't, I encourage you to go look at the Mythbusters training we've done in the past. We are fully distributed, and Amazon only makes up, for particularly for our distribution house, anywhere from 24% to 40% of sales. So where are those other 60 to 60, 80% of sales coming from? Well, there's a lot of other bookstores. Maybe you guys remember like going to Barnes and Noble, right? Or maybe you remember going to Books A Million. They're still actively selling, and there's a ton of indie bookstores that people really trust as well. So since that evolution, we have launched 2 other books. We've got a third one that's about to come out soon and a fourth one in queue that you guys are still welcome to join. Some of you guys are here because you are a part of that book, which is the Joyful Anthology number 3. We do a lot of things. I'm not going to get into all the things that we do as a publishing house because you guys are here to learn about the ink and tears connected to it. But there's been a lot of ink and tears connected to the launch of this publishing house. And as we are 2 years in, helping other authors do the same. So there's about 65 authors that are in our house currently. And we're excited to bring on more in the next year. All right, let's get into it. I had an idea, Julianne, before we actually share ours, I would love for you guys to take about maybe a minute and a half, I think is plenty of time to just write down some of the emotional stumbling blocks, whether they're these ones from the screen or they're other things that you've come into, so we can make sure that we address all of them. What are some of the emotional stumbling blocks that you've come into contact with? I'm gonna just turn on some music for a moment and let you guys contemplate. Hey guys, my computer just shut down. Love tech. I am not sure why this keeps happening for those of you who have been on any of my calls recently. So Julianne, if you have the slide deck open, we can keep going. I was like talking to you guys and jamming, and then I realized, oh, they're all frozen. They're beautiful faces. So we're going to jump into the emotional stumbling blocks. Does somebody want to share out loud while she cues that up? What are some of the things that you guys were processing or have been processing? Go ahead and unmic at any point.
For me, it's wanting to know all the steps before even starting to write, right? Like I've had this begin with the end in mind, but I'm not sure it applies to writing because I've learned you're just supposed to start writing.
Would you say, and I don't even know that we're addressing this today, but I love that you just brought this up, that would be a cue for perfectionism?
Absolutely.
Okay. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm like, what's the one word? What's the one word for that? Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. I feel that very much so, especially if you're a planner. So planning is like a good thing. Perfectionism is probably not as much of a good thing, but they can sometimes hinder and come alongside each other. Anybody else want to share?
I think for me, it's making sure that I'm making a connection, right? So when you have one-to-one with someone, you can tell if you're making a connection. But when you're writing a book, you're like, well, I don't know if this person's going to relate to what I'm even saying, or will they, get the insight that they need to make a change for themselves. So I'm struggling. I've shared my little piece of writing with other people in my family, and they don't get it. They just don't get what I'm doing. So.
Okay, well, hold on, son. Okay, sorry. That is interesting. And I would say, and we're going to talk specifically about the familial element to what you're mentioning here, because, well, I'll just say it right now so you have a little bit of peace. Remember, your family is likely not your target audience. Everyone's nodding. Yes, everyone's nodding. They are likely not your target audience. So that's a huge portion of who do you give the information out to? Who do you entrust your story with when you're in these formative, really fragile state? Okay, great feedback. Thank you. Anybody else want to share?
So,
Share.
oh, go ahead.
Mine is more of the isolation and like the silence of it all, like sitting with my thoughts and trying to put them in a way that sounds cohesive and thorough. It can really be daunting for me.
That's really good. And that's one of the first things we're going to be talking about today. So I'm glad you brought that up. April, you wanted to share as well?
Yes. So at first I felt like one of the things that the Lord was really speaking to me about was my fear of failure. And I have a thing on my wall that said, let your faith be bigger than your fear. But then when I started to like go a little bit deeper, like past that surface, it wasn't so much the fear of failure. It was actually the fear of success. He flipped the script on me, which makes a lot of sense with my chapter on the anthology of why I'm moving in this direction that chapter, because I really feel like the Lord really wants me to be successful. I'm concerned though, because I have done business, I have done life, I have done so many things for so long, for the wrong reasons with the wrong heart. And I want more than anything to do this next thing is totally to glorify God. And I am in a purging sanctification process to be sure that all things are out of the way and that I leave as much room for him as possible so that the success will only fall to glorify him this time instead of me. So I'm not afraid to fail. I'm afraid to succeed because I don't want the success to be about myself, if that makes sense.
I think sometimes in the midst of that, we're also afraid to shine. And Julianne is an expert in teaching that. She hosts conferences all around it. So I love that, April, because you were definitely, since the first time I met you, very shiny. You had an electric spirit. But I resonate with that fear of success piece, and we will get into that as well today. So great. Anyone else want to share before we jump in? All right, Julianne, take it away, girl.
So good. And I've been through all of those, all of the ones that you've said, and so many more. I wanted to write down kind of the common ones that we see come up once I've been through myself, once Tamra's been through, ones that we are actively working with our active clients right now, our authors. Self-doubt is a big one, right? And it's those stories that we've been telling ourselves. And so it's really learning to, one, identify what those are. And when you are talking about isolation, right, Janice, when you are trying to do it on your own, that's when you feel stuck, like what, because you don't have somebody to kind of bounce those ideas off of. Hey, is this truth? Is this what I'm understanding to be real? And when Tamra mentioned her beta reader that just was like, no, I remember one of my first beta readers, and she was like, it's predictable. And I was floored because I was like, what you mean it's quadruple. Like I had quadruplet, I had a walkout in my company. My dad died of Alzheimer's. Like, I need your gift of prophecy, woman, because I didn't see any of that coming. None of it was predictable. But anyway, there's so often when we are trying to find the quick answer, right? The fastest way to the point, the cheapest way to the help, we are short changing ourselves and our message and what God intends to do in us and through us, right, April? Like through this journey of becoming the one who's going to hold the impact, the one who is going to build the character inside enough to hold the weight of that glory that he is going to be receiving. Perfectionism is huge. It's so important to focus on the progress of it all. And we hear that all the time, right? Progress over perfection. But the actual walking the thing out, again, making sure that you're with people who get it, who have been there, who have traveled that. Because sometimes it's a simple perspective shift, right? Of what we are seeing as perfection, but what as somebody else, an outside perspective, say, well, look at all the progress that you've made. And so just that simple shift can really help you start to move forward again. Comparison, it's huge. It's out there. It's in our face everywhere that we go. And, that's something that the Lord is always working. I feel like he's working with everyone through that at some point when we are trying to bring out something, a part of our gifting, a part of our, calling and favor and what he's anointed us to do. That is an enemy tactic, right? Isolation, comparison, making you feel like, well, okay, there's already so many books out there. Why is somebody going to read mine? Right? Overwhelm and idea overload. Yes, they're different. And yes, they're very similar. Okay. Sometimes we're overwhelmed in the actual process of everything. We can get overwhelmed in, okay, I do have to meet this deadline. Okay. I need, 30 pages by tomorrow. Okay. I need to have my outline done. There can be that kind of systematic overwhelm. And then there's also this overwhelm for new authors, especially of like, oh, I could talk about this and I could talk about this and I could talk about this, right? And we just kind of squirrel and chase those shiny objects all over the place. And so having somebody come along with you and be like, all right, this is all amazing. This can be book 2, right? But for this book, let's really bring it in and allow you to see. And so structure the book properly. And Tamra's going to go into storyboarding later. But all of these, again, stumbling blocks that can come up, we have solutions for. Fear of failure. April, you talked about fear of success. Those do go hand in hand. Lack of motivation, that can be in all aspects of life when we are trying to do something new, when we're trying to birth something big. Talking about the whole pregnancy analogy, right? There's sometimes we just want to lay down and put our feet up. But there's discipline involved, and being able to know what you have to do and see it through a lens of, I get to do it. I was called to do this. I answered yes to this. God's name is on the line. One of the books that I'm going to be working on and have been working on that will be coming out in probably 2026 is kind of in the lens of, Simon Sinek has his book. It starts with why, right? And he like blew up with that. And everybody talks about their why. You got to know your why, and you do. But it really starts with who we are called to serve. And when we take on that mentality of, okay, yes, I have all this stuff to do. I don't feel motivated to do it. Who am I doing it for? Right. And it just, again, it's that perspective shift that we need to kind of like get our gears back in motion. Writer's block, we will go into this in another slide, but it is so common. And it can be due to several different kinds of things that come up. And so it will happen. It will happen at some point in your journey. When you are writing, you will have some form of a moment. And so we're going to talk about ways to kind of navigate through that. And then Janice brought up isolation. We've talked a little bit about that, but these are just some of the most common stumbling blocks that we have seen, one, experience with ourselves, and two, seen other writers experience as well.
Julian, before you go on, because we are going to give you guys some tools to these things, because it's great. We're all like on the same page. Everyone's shaking your head like, yeah, we've been there.
Been there.
We all get it. Two of the things that you mentioned that I wanted to say before we jump into the next slides is for the comparison. One of the things that we literally ask you to do when you come to the table and bring your book synopsis, and I was asked this when I first did it too, is what are the comps in the industry? So a part of that is knowing the competition, knowing the comparables. It's two things, right? So what does your book compare to is actually a really big benefit. We are about to launch another book, and it's a women's devotional. It's our first women's devotional, in fact, and it's called More Than Enough. And there is a book that just came out by Jamie Lee Kerma all about, it's called Worthy. And all the marketing, all these things that everybody's saying about it, I'm like, this is why we did our book. Like, and I felt during her book launch, I had two opportunities to look at through a lens. I could look at God's lens, or I could look at the enemy's tactical lens of keeping me in this place of comparison, rather than saying, wow, she actually paved the way for this devotional to be successful. And so I'm cheering her on. The more her message hits, the more people that land with that, I then get to piggyback that, because I don't have the size audience she does, to say, hey, this is that and some more Jesus, right? Because there's some elements of that where I was like, man, she's a Christian. I love that so much. And I know that there's going to be some great introductions in that, but comps are critical, and they don't always have to be creating a division, but instead an invitation into your book also being successful. So it's okay to know who should you be looking at and comparing and saying, she did one very similar, but that's a great thing, right? Because God's trying to get his message out, and he can't get his message to everyone through everyone, which is why your story matters. And then the second part I would say is the who that she was referencing. It's like, it's not necessarily about the why, and we can look to the who of ourselves and the who of the avatar or the reader. And also the primary portion is who told you to write it, right? And when you go back to Daddy, man, and he's like, I told you, you know, we get to work with so many authors. I could think of one particular, I won't name drop here, but every single time I have an interaction with her, she gets so emotional because she is about to birth something that's been inside of her for nearly 3 decades. And so to know that God has been telling you to do something for 3 decades, I don't want to be that person. I'm like, okay, Lord, where, when, how? Like, let's jump in right now. Usually he's reining me backwards because I've learned the power of obedience and what that does for unlocking more doors to the kingdom. So understanding your who as the identity of the author, we'll talk about that because that's an emotional place that a lot of people can be, is like, who am I, right, to write a book? But additionally, knowing that who told you to write it is the motivation that keeps me going every single day. So it kind of takes two of those concepts and brings them into one. So yeah.
And
all right.
back with your worthy reference, right? It's familiarity.
Yeah.
When we talk about the anthology to people, many people haven't heard the term anthology. They're confused kind of by like co-authors, co-writing experience. But when we say, you know, it is like chicken soup for the soul, everybody goes,
Yes.
right? They know that reference. And so again, to Tamra's point, having that familiarity to be able to explain to people, they're like, oh, great. And that's why, again, it's not great to compare, but to see it as a way of, okay, this is a reference point. People understand that, and this is how we're doing it different. This is how we're showing up. And so it's a great way to keep moving forward. All right. Isolation. Miss Tamra, take it away.
I think you're on isolation, but I'll happily go.
Oh, am I?
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Yeah, this is yours.
Is it? Okay, great. I'm excited to chat. I was like, wait, I think you're up. I'm up. All right. So isolation, Janice, when you were talking, it was actually less about feeling alone in the writing process and more about the silence and all of the thought patterns of going on in your mind. And we know that the enemy likes to play in that zone, right? He likes to trick us. He likes to connive us. He likes to say like, no, who are you to write this? And you should just stop now. It doesn't even sound good, right? But I think there's also another layer to that, and it's the isolation of what it feels like to write a book, especially even what Christina was saying, when other people don't get it. they're like, why are you going to release your story? Like, I don't really understand why you would want to share that part of your story. It's not very becoming, right? It's not the best part of you. And so this is the facade of breaking those chains. Some of the ways that we combat that, and there's a mass majority of opportunities to jump into different communities. Fit Press has established this through writers groups, workshops, and online community. So when you come a part of Fit Press, you actually get to go into cohorts of authors beyond just if you're doing a cohort project. We are actually launching into direct writers coaching. And so beyond cool virtual experiences like this that is open to the public, you'll have direct training opportunities. Especially if you come in as a singular author, we're actually doing coaching conversations with you through the process so you don't feel alone, so you can bounce off ideas, so you actually get feedback from other people. Hey, here's the title that I'm looking for. Here's the subtitle. What do you guys think? Does it land? And you're going to have other writers, one, who understand the process, and two, who are giving you vital feedback, because a majority of authors are readers, and a majority of people inside of our community are all connected to testimonial, faith-driven, faith-foundational work. And so they want to see your book survive and thrive because it's about kingdom expansion. And so when you're in a writer's group or a workshop like this, and you can actually bounce those ideas off of each other, hey guys, we're going to talk about the back of your book today. And so on the back of your book, what are the fundamental things that you need? What do you have already? We'll give you that framework before you show up so that we can process it together. And we're actually going to troubleshoot, right? Live together. So you aren't thinking and hitting your head against the wall thinking this is going to be terrible. Or like me, which I love to do, I've got books all over my house. I will just stack together all of my favorites and then I'll create mine from there. But who would have given you that idea if you've never thought about that idea, right? So support, feedback, encouragement. Of course, camaraderie is important. Perspective is important. And my favorite thing is connected to the book launch process. So no different than our podcasters community, when you have a bunch of other authors who are like, I'm going to buy this book on launch day. I'm willing to share it out. Actually, I have a podcast I'd love for you to come on during your launch season for you to be able to share about your book so we can drive more sales. This is the camaraderie of kingdom collaboration that we are very intentional about. And I have been a part of many other author cohorts, and that is not the case. It is crickets in the community. They're not active, and or they are not sharing. And that is, sharing is caring, right? We learned this in preschool. And that's something that we're really adamant about, is like, hey guys, remember when you published your book 2 years ago? Remember how that felt? Let's all jump on board and send some love. Let's spread some joy. Let's actually put this on our socials and go that extra mile for one another. It makes a huge difference. So isolation is something we're constantly combating. And we've built these things into our organization on purpose.
Absolutely. And just to piggyback on that, you talked about the book launching and its continuation, right? I mean, Tamra's book, Always Becoming, was just featured in Times Square, right? And it was huge. And to be there with her and celebrate that, even though we weren't in Times Square, we were in Orlando, but it's not saying, well, that's not me. I can't support that. It's knowing that me too, like this is coming for me too, and to be able to truly support other writers and in all aspects of the journey, whether they're like, hey Janice, what do you think about this title, right? And you're like, oh girl, it's so good. Or wait, this isn't landing. Or hey, would you mind reading a chapter, and things like that to really help grow. And as Tamara's point of, she's been in communities where that hasn't been the case. Everybody's like, hey, go buy my book. And then that's it. And you're like,
right.
I don't know you. I don't know
so
anything
much
about
more.
you.
Yeah,
Right.
there's so much more.
There's
Also,
so much
Julianne,
more
I
to
would
it.
say endorsements are something you're going to
Yeah.
eventually have to do. Rachel can talk to that maybe a bit when she shares as well, who is one of our Fit Press authors that's here to join and talk and teach too, is to process through, like, some people are like, I'm just starting. I don't really have a community. I've never been online before. I don't know, Joe or Tony Robbins or whoever. I don't know Adam. And we in our group groups because we've been doing this longer do. And so I'm thinking for Rachel all the time, I'm like, okay, so she is doing a bullying book and it's about identity and all of these other elements of work. And I'm like, who do I know in the industry who could be an amazing endorsement for her? And so we've already, in her own work and some of our connections, been able to get her some endorsements of people who have millions of followers. And that's going to be huge for her book. And so it really is, Julianne, you're so right about like the next steps. One thing that we do here that a lot of people never encourage, but a book is not a book just because you launched it and now it's in a bookstore. There is a breathing being out on bookshelves that we have to continue to breathe life into. Otherwise, bookstores retract it and you're like way far down. You're dead in the water when it comes to these other people who are bringing new ideas to life. Is birthday parties. Book birthday parties. And you want to have people, when you have a birthday party, you want other people to attend, right? And so I had like 70 people on my first year birthday for my book. And we had like birthday hats and everyone came in celebration. This was a time, Christina, that my family actually was, oh, she just snuck out. Anyway, this was a time that actually my family did come and support, because guess what? At this point, I had testimonies that I could share. They actually saw the traction that the book was taking. They actually were like, oh, wow, this is a freedom thing. This is a God-led thing. This isn't what Tamra's idea. So that book birthday party that you're going to have all these cohort members come to, that actually boosted my book back to #1 in multiple different categories, simply because I breathed life into it again. And so those are things that other publishing houses aren't doing because they're trying to funnel more people in and get more books. Some of these big publishing houses like Penguin House, they have 17,000 authors a year. Do you think they care about your book birthday party? Probably not. We love you, Penguin House. Maybe. I don't know the fundamentals there. But regardless, like, this is something that we love to do because it really is, at the end of the day, about relationship. And so enemy tactic #1, isolation. God's tactic is relationship. And so that's why we're who we are with Fit Press.
I love it. I love it. Imposter syndrome. This is so very common, and some of the thoughts, right, are, what if nobody reads it? I haven't made it yet. So often we feel like, well, I have to be certain level of expert, right, in order to make any kind of impact on anybody. Who cares? Who do you think you are? Not enough. All of those voices, those lies that kind of travel through our mind during this process. And the truth is, when you are in this kind of community, this kind of support, this kind of encouragement, it allows you again to borrow that perspective, to borrow that encouragement, to borrow that joy, and use it to fuel you through all of these pulling down kind of emotions, right? These heavy emotions. Because the truth is, even if you haven't made it yet, nobody makes it. Nobody's at the top. And if you are at the top, I kind of feel bad for you because there's so much more to come, right? And so to be able to really navigate through, you know what? I haven't made it yet, but I do know a lot of things and I do hold a unique perspective. Tamra and I are saying all the time, like, we are very, very similar. We have, the same kind of mannerisms. We are very shiny. We like all the sparkles, right? We love the joy and the encouragement. And yet we still bring different perspectives to the exact same topic. And that is what we are able to offer you as well. And so even though you might be thinking, well, nobody reads it, we're like, well, first of all, you're a part of this cohort, this author experience. And so you're going to have many people read it and share about it, and thinking, well, who cares more than you know? Because here's the truth. Oh, this is a deep one. You ready? Here's the truth. It's not about you. I said it. It has so much more to do with who God is going to be impacting through your story. He's doing the work in you during the writing process, during the editing process, during the publishing process, during the marketing process, right? And then it's going out into the world. And the goal is to have a book that people can find themselves in. because God is going to use your story, how you overcame it, to speak directly into their heart so that he can start transforming and working inside of them. Right. And so again, knowing that like, okay, it's really not about me. It's not about me. That is the number one thing I use. I will say it out loud when I feel that imposter syndrome coming up, because it's not about me. Tamra?
Yeah, I would say I was looking at the definition of imposter syndrome because it's something people cling to a lot. And as Christians, it's actually the antithesis of the one thing God calls us into connected to our faith. So here's the definition. It says, the persistent inability to believe. Ooh. The persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts or skills. So if you go to the second half of that, is one's own effort or skills. It's not your own effort. It's not your own skills. And that's where God gets glorified through us having full faith and belief that this is his story as much as it is our story. And because, again, going back to who called you to it, he called you to it, he's going to bring you through it. And so it's that age old, like he doesn't equip the called, he doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called. Right? You're going to realize that through the writing journey and then the testifying journey on the other side of that, the stages you're going to hit, the podcasts you're going to be on, the people you're going to have intimate prayer conversations with at conferences or via your DMs, or when you're in a grocery store, heaven forbid, that you have an opportunity to testify. Those are the moments where you realize, whoa, that imposter syndrome was so silly of me. That was so crazy because I am in this moment with these people, and this is the no better time for me to actually glorify God and get out of the way of myself. So I'm excited about this for you guys. And to remember, whenever this comes up, even for someone else, just remind them you're partnering with the enemy and saying that you have the inability to believe and you're focused on yourself. So maybe don't say it that way. They might not be friends with you anymore, but say it gingerly and just really go into the fact that there is an inability to believe there. What if you believed? What if you believed you are enough, right? Which is what our whole thing is, more than enough.
Yeah, I love it. So good. Creative blocks. It's Tamra.
All right. Creative blocks. I think I'm like between two screens here. Hopefully you guys can see me down here. My freezing. We got another person coming in the room. Stand by. Let me get her in. Oh, Lydia. She probably lost connection too. She's down in Mexico. So my issue is just bad internet. Hers is Mexico. But we're going to talk about the creative blocks today and unlocking your creativity. So change up your scenery. This is something that is so critical for me specifically. I can't write at
I'm going to say she's saying at home at her desk.
I cannot write. I cannot write at my desk right here. When I write at my desk right here, you should see all the sticky notes and the to-do list and everything that's around me that I don't have the capability of staying focused. And even if I did have the capability of staying focused at my thing, I've got puppies who want to go outside. I've got laundry that's on my mind. I've got the mailman who's knocking and the Amazon package is coming. And so how do I take away the distractions so that my creative blocks are not actually coming at the rapid pace that they do when we're in our normal environment? The way that I have always done this since day one has been going on writers' retreats. And we are actually doing a whole new writers' retreat experience, which is a virtual writers' retreat, so that when you decide you're going to go for a staycation, which is generally what I do, I just get a hotel right here in my city in case my kids do need me for something, in case my hubby does want to sneak a kiss. They actually will generally, because I still have to eat in these processes, they'll come meet me for dinner and then I give kisses and I go right back up to the hotel. And so this allows me to stay wildly focused, and I can get upwards of 20,000 to 30,000 words done in a 2-day time frame. That is half of your book, if not your whole book, depending on what genre of book you're writing. So huge. And I don't have creative blocks because of the next thing, the way that I storyboard, the way that I have writer's prompts that are actually calling me into the conversation that I'm about to have, with the pen and paper or with the keyboard at that moment. So one of the cool parts about working with us is when you come alongside, I actually give you this organizational chart. I'll tell you just offhand because it's not necessarily a secret. It's just something I've really formulated over the course of the last 6 years while writing. Is it has chapter titles. It has your ideation around chapter titles based on the stories that you're going to share, the topics inside of said chapter, the resources in which you are going to provide in said chapter, because we know that there is resources that have used us to get us to this place of expertise. You want to build that in to your framework. Additionally, if there's biblical references, because you're doing it with a faith lens, that's another category that happens on this chart. And basically, I will fill this thing out when I am at church. And I'm like, ooh, I want to share that story. Or, ooh, that's a good biblical reference to this problem that I had. Every day I am content building, every single day. So when it comes to creative blocks, I that's not a problem. If anything, I'm like, shut it down, Tamra, shut it down, right? And especially when you're trying to sleep and you're dreaming it up. A lot of people in this, they would say, put a notepad and pen next to your bed. I don't do that. I just sit there and daydream with the Lord and I give it to him. I'm like, please let me sleep right now. I do this all day long. The last thing that I would say in this category is the exercise, play, and dance. It's like, get up. Get away from the writing. Stop the incessant obsession. That's a tongue twister of what it is that you're trying to get out. Even stop thinking about it as a task list and a to-do. Some writers like to say, hey, I want to write 500 words or 1,000 words for the next 3 months. And there are cycles and systems that can allow you to do this. And they have writer's prompts that take you through it. That just doesn't work for me. And that doesn't mean it wouldn't work for you. But when I come to this place of like, I need to take a break. I need to ground. I need to get my feet in the grass. For me, I live at the ocean. So me, it's for getting my feet in the sand. I need to take a worship break and just play and dance around with my kiddos. And then when I come back to that table of that writing prompt or that storyboard organizer, I feel so refueled and I've got new stories to share because I have new energy to go into it. So one of the things I mentioned, the virtual retreat. This is a way in which you guys can actually, or I can actually be immersed on your virtual retreat experience. So if you're having a staycation at your house and you're sending your family out to go do something else, just remember there might still be chores. So I do encourage it the opposite way, but we would have a day and a half together and I would start the day with you. We would have breaks in the center of your writing to make sure you're in fluidity. We would do the storyboard organizing. Rachel can actually speak to this directly because she came to one of our in-person retreats when she shares and how fundamental it was for the launch of her actual book. And now a year, 2 years almost later, she has her book in hand and it's in an editor right now. And it wouldn't have been to the same organization status if she didn't have other people, specifically me, in the training of how that was coming to fruition. And then the last thing I'll share in this, if you are like, I want to do this, but I don't want to be isolated. I'm already alone enough. Well, you can come on one of the in-person writing retreats that that's the kind that Rachel went to. And our next one is happening in October and we're going to the Bahamas. So if you want to really use the grounding technique and get your feet in the sand and see some beautiful water, I'll give you guys exact dates as soon as we have them. We're waiting on a conference that I'm going to couple it with. So you'll also get to go to a conference in the Bahamas as a part of the writing retreat. It's going to be really fun. So those are some of the ways that we face it. Julianne, is there anything you want to add there, or even Rachel, if you want to share about your experience in the retreat?
Yeah, before we get to the retreat, one thing that came up to me while you were talking about, the storyboard, and so often we might be like, well, I'm creative, right? I'm an artist and it's hard for me to get organized and plan everything out. I want to be in flow. And that's great. Flow is great, right? And so to that point, right, we can help you organize to go with your energy time of day, right? Okay, this is when you need to be sitting down to write during your most creative energy flow times. And with that, one of the things that was said to me that I took to heart and utilized and was life-giving was, don't edit yourself when you sit down to write. Because so often we'll go back and start reading and then we're like, oh wait, no, I need to change that. And so we put on this editor's helmet and we're now looking through an editor's lens, right? Which is to take everything you just did apart. And so when you're in that lens and then you're now going to try and create again, that's very hard to shift from. And so If you are sitting down to write, get it all out. Allow things, even if you're like, that story, I don't know why God's bringing that up. I don't know if that really fits in here. Get it out, because again, whether it makes the final draft of your book is not the point. God is doing something in you in that moment. So get it out, because it might bring about a revelation that you can talk about later in your book, right? So that's just something I wanted to touch on real quick. Rachel, did you want to share to the retreat?
Yeah, I can share. So the author retreat was my launching pad. So my husband and I decided that it was the financial investment that we needed for me to launch off. And so I walked in to a room full of ladies that I knew didn't know at all. I had met Tamra and that was it. And so I came in there with all those things you saw in the previous slide, thinking, oh my goodness, they have all these businesses, all those things. But we sat down to write. And what I loved about it is it didn't matter who did what. We all bounced ideas off of each other. And honestly, I came in with a completely different idea and a completely different title than when I left the retreat. And what I loved is I wrote an introduction. I felt great about it, but I asked another person to read it. And what was amazing for me is she was able to look through different lenses, and she took out a piece and she said, that's great that you have a husband that you could lean on. But what about if the person picking up this book doesn't have a husband or doesn't have a spouse? They're going to put the book down. And so being able to see different lenses for that, but also the thing that I got the most out of was Tamra kind of guided us, and then we launched off. And I was able to take all my different stories within the bigger story of bullying and really see the different avenues I could go with it. And that really helped me get a framework of what chapters to do. I did shift around as I was writing, but it really gave me a framework so that when I sat down, I have 4 children. When I sat down, it wasn't, okay, where do I start? What story do I pull? I already had the bones, and then I could dive in. And so that was a big piece for me, was the community to come alongside and share different things that they even saw. Like, for example, I had the big idea, but I really didn't know how to pull it all together. And so that's what birthed my chapter titles, was having the other ladies there say, oh, did you think about this? Or, oh, because mine was about really opening doors that people don't open, things they don't talk about when it comes to bullying. And they were able to see that, where I couldn't see that lens, but now I've run with it and I love it.
Oh, it's so good. So good. Tamara, anything else on creative blocks?
I love it. Any questions? I know we haven't really made space for questions yet. I want to make sure we're creating that. And also, you're welcome to drop it in the chat at any point. And additionally, for those who are jumping in and out, if you guys wouldn't mind dropping your email inside of the chat and maybe your most engaged social media account. We want to first follow you and be alongside your author journey, whether or not we're your publisher or not. And additionally, we would love to tag and share that you guys were here today, and give any extra little kudos and shout outs in that space. So feel free to put your email in the chat and your most frequented location. All right, Rachel, you're actually up still, so you can take your water sip and jump back in.
All right. So, something that I wanted to share today is when you're writing, I think it was Lydia, but if I have the wrong person in mind, you talked about perfectionism, and I will come back to that. But as I was writing, when you're a writer, you want to feel like the expert. And so I had 2 to 3 chapters left to go. I was feeling really good. I had flow. My book is a guidebook for parents and caregivers that has a child that's being bullied. And so I take them from the moment of trying to figure out what's going on and figuring out that their child truly is getting bullied, to walking them all the way through the action steps of finding healing for their child. And so I was in the heart of the healing part. How do you instill better mindset? How do you really make them find their identity and worth again? And my daughter actually came home from school and had the worst day and just went off on me. She's not a cusser, but she's a middle schooler now. And it felt like everything that we had worked towards fell apart. Like she didn't have it. She didn't have her identity. She didn't know her worth that day. And I remember sitting in that moment thinking, why am I writing this? Here I am trying to help other people, and I don't even have it right. She's fallen apart. If she was to walk on stage with me in this moment, would somebody really want to pick up my book? No. And so I remember in that moment, God telling me, this is exactly why you are writing this book. Because people need to know that nobody is ever fully healed this side of heaven. However, he told me that he has given me the steps to help other people come out. And so I was able to take what I had written. There's things in my books that I wish I would have done or somebody would have told me along the way. And so I was able to walk that out with my daughter. And we were able to say, okay, what is really the root of why you're screaming XYZ? And we were able to get it down to it and then replace it with I am, but it's not just the I am like all the secular world gives us. It was taking scripture for her to really pour back into her heart and her mind. And so I was able to walk her through steps that I had shared in my book. And had I not done that, they would have just been knowledge, but not experience on my end. And then I was also able to take that to myself because everybody has an underlying negative I am statement, and mine has always been, I am not enough. Hence part of why I'm in the women's devotional, More Than a Woman. But what got me through is I had a resource from author Mimika Cooney, and she actually says words are containers of power. We need to know the importance of what we're saying and how we're saying it. And so that was for me to take it back in. So I got in the word. And what really got me through is might look silly, but I actually had these headphones that I put on every single time that I wrote. I did get the author retreat, but I never had a staycation. I did send my children out, or I did write during my youngest nap time. But the only reason I was able to do it, because I remember Tamra saying, how do you get anything done? I was able to take the distractions, put these on, and what infiltrated my mind and my ears was worship music, not word worship music, or I'd be singing and dancing and not focused. It was piano worship music, but that grounded me in the sense of, spoiler alert, we aren't enough. We are never enough, but he is enough. And so that is what helped me get through that block of putting on worship music, reminding me this is for the Lord. And also I put in my book, in the acknowledgments, what got me through is knowing that there's going to be a mama, there's going to be a grandma, there's going to be an auntie, there's going to be a counselor that needs this book. And so I was pushing through to provide that gift to them, pushing through the heartache of, because when we're writing our books, I have it on my Instagram. I have reels of it. I had the tears flowing, remembering everything, working through the trauma. But that's what got me through, is really seeing that I needed to walk what I was going through, and that I just lost my train of thought. That we aren't always going to be enough, but he will help us through it, and really instilling in me, instead of that inner critic, that I am enough in him.
Rachel, I love that part and the knowledge point of like, you're still healing as you're laying out your healing journey, right? And that's okay. Like, God is literally so sovereign. He's so sweet and he's so kind. My first book took me 3 years to write. Okay. So grace upon grace to any missed deadlines of your guys' out there. And I know the moment that I turn that last page over, because after I'm done, I print them out and I read, and I'm like reading it. And that last page I turned, I literally heard, it is finished. And I remember just rejoicing and being like, oh, thank God, I'm done with this thing. And at the same time, like I was so expectant, but I knew that every single layer of that journey was so critical because some of the things that closed out the book were most fundamental, right? Rachel, you having that kind of altercation with your daughter was fundamental to the next portion of writing that you were going to do and the healing that you were going to be able to provide other people. So we go through everything with intention. He doesn't waste any tear, any frustration, any scenario. And I love that part about the process.
It's so good. I always say, living it is running through the forest, getting slapped in the face by the branches, right? That's the experience of living the thing out. And then the writing process is bird's eye view. Like now we get to see more of what was going on. We get to see the forest through the trees. And the editing process and everything that comes after, that's God's eye view. Like that is really getting into the position, the heart posture of everything that this is being used for. So good. Let's go into the fear of hurting others. We've talked on this a little bit, but Tamra, if you want to take this one away.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's going to be that experience where you're going to be, Christina mentioned it at the beginning, you're going to be worried about what other people are thinking, right? And you don't want to hurt them and they're a part of your story. And yet, in order for you to share the story effectively, you have to mention said person. We know that there are kind ways to do that. There are ginger ways to do that, that you're not pointing fingers because ownership is why you're writing a book, right? You have already decided, I own my story. And because you own your story, you don't have to at any point when you're writing about somebody else point to them, but instead let them be a slide detail to the narrative of your story. So how do you balance truth and be sensitive to other people? It's you sharing your version of the story and you making sure that they do not become the main character. They at no point need to become the main character. One thing that people will also allude to is, well, I don't want to mention their name. You can still have a nonfiction book and have fake names inside of your book. And that does not change the categorization, and that also protects people inside of your story. So let's say it was an old pastor, or it was an old organization, or it was an old coworker, or it was a sister or a brother or anything. You can still say Joe, you can still call her Cindy, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be that it's outward, because there will be people who pick up your book that are in your community and they're like, oh, I never knew that so-and-so did that. And that's not the point, to elaborate on gossip. The point of it is to create healing opportunities for people. And so, yes, we know that often people hurt people, and there's going to be other people in your book and in your story, but to be mindful of that and gracious in the way that you do it and present it. Another element of that is that you can ask for permission. If you have a safe relationship with those people and they are not going to completely just stab you in the back with their words in the moment of saying, hey, this is something I really want to share in my book, and I know it can be sensitive to our relationship, so I wanted to be sensitive in asking you, are you okay if I share this version of the story, which is hopefully God's version and not just your version and not just their version. Getting permission. Something that they might ask is, can I read it before it's released? Now, you want to err with caution on this behalf, because you could get your whole book done and then they decide, yeah, I don't want that shared. And it could really ruin the narrative of what it is that you're creating. So I would encourage you to let that be a part of your healing process. Let that be a part of that relational development that's going to happen through your book writing process. Again, you're going to have a testimony just because you wrote a book. You're going to have a testimony that's on top of the testimony. The other thing I would say, we have some authors, a husband and wife, who have 7 children. They have completed their book. They 100% want to release it because they know that their story of through their marriage is fundamental to the marriage ministry that they're launching, the speaking that they want to do. This is going to be a part of their platform. Well, they decided they wanted their children to have a final say on the approval of it being released before they decided to have their publishing contract secure. Well, that did not go over so well. Some of them were really encouraging and they had great things to say about it. And some of them had a complete tiff in regards to a hissy fit is the word I was looking for. Hissy fit in regards to the response. And they felt like portions of the story they didn't know because, you know, your kids don't know all the details, right? So they felt just ashamed. They felt upset. They felt angry that they didn't know before this book was going to be released. Well, we are now almost a year later, and that book is still not in production because now they're working on mending, sharing more truth, having healing internally. And what do you think that that's doing? Yes, I believe Lord is getting praise in that process, but it caused such family dynamic shifts that some crazy things transpired. Now, I know the inner workings of that story. I won't always know the inner workings of every single author, but I am telling you, based on what Christina shared as well, your family is not your ideal avatar. So they do not need to read the entire story in order for you to get permission for them to be included in your book. And or some people in my book, they don't even know they're in my book. Unless they decide to read it and they'd be surprised, they don't know that I shared that particular story. And they're not, again, in my safe community for me to go after and say, hey, is it okay if, right? I am not ostracizing them. I am not pointing fingers at them, but they are a critical part. It could be a coach, it could be a teacher, it could be an organization, it could be a location, right? All of those places are critical, but I am not throwing them under the bus in the process. Does anybody have any specific questions about that? Because I know this can be a very temperamental space, especially if it's like a spouse, right? My spouse is in my book. I actually read him the chapter that revealed some things that transpired in our relationship. It's the only chapter to this day he's ever read or heard because he's not a reader and he didn't feel like he needed it. He lived through it, right? And so it's okay for them not to read your story. You don't need to be offended.
That's such a good point, Tamra. I mean, and that's like my husband's never read
Yeah.
read my book either. And that's okay. And you know, one of the things that we're about to get to is, you know, paint the picture versus exposing the nitty-gritty. That can be a way too of kind of casting the picture, right? Without going into extreme detail of how things happened. In my book, I talk about a big betrayal in my company. I had a mutiny that kind of occurred, and I never listed anybody's name out. I talked about the emotional feelings that I had with this person. And I had it all from my perspective. And I even said in there, you know, and their perspective might differ at the end of the day, but this is mine, right? And talking about family and hurting others, you know, I had my mom, she was my first editor because she was an English teacher. And I'm like, this is a good way to save money. And it was a horrible way to save money. I should have just spent the money. So note to self. But you know, she read my book and I go into details about my dad's Alzheimer's and what that 18 months was like from his diagnosis to his death and how that rocked me. And she flat out told me, you don't need to have some of these stories in here because she hadn't dealt with it yet. And that is when we start involving family and inner circle and things like that into the writing process, the editing process of our book. We're opening the door to somebody else's opinions and perspectives that isn't healed, right? There was a part of that knows all those emotional things that happen and they haven't worked through it yet. And so just be very aware of that. And again, that's why we provide support and encouragement throughout the whole process, because otherwise we tend to like want to go to our friend and our neighbor and our, you know, mom. So I just wanted to bring that out.
Oh, that's so great. You can go on to the next slide, Julian.
Okay. Family responses. We were just talking about this. Right. And so like one of the things that I was talking about in my book, I go over my brother's alcoholism because he almost died twice. And I talk about that. And on the back of the book, you know, I had said kind of overview, you know, what the things they're talking about, my 5-year storm. And I had written my brother's addiction. And my editor was like, here's the thing. And my brother had given his permission for the story to be in the book. but his daughters didn't know about what he was working through. And so what my editor shared with me, which I so appreciated, was, you can just say a family member instead of identifying your brother as the addict, because his daughter could have picked up the back of the book, right? And just seen that and been like, what? She wasn't going to read through my book to discover that information. And so little things like that really helps you open up. Oh, okay. I see how I can mask and not have his name very apparent on the back. So it's just a way for you to really understand the full, considering the cost, right, of
Yeah.
telling your story, but doing so still authentic, still true to you, still in your words and in your perspective.
And I'll share specifically for my family and my book. My kids were little, much littler when my book was released. They didn't know what sex or shame stood for. They didn't even know how to read. Well, now if you come into my studio here, I've got all of our books everywhere and they're on display, and my kids know what that means now. And it has never been a curiosity to this point for them to say, what does that mean? What is that story about? Right? They have never asked. And so I've been in this place where I've been like, oh, yay, ignorance is bliss, right? Well, that's not always going to be the case. And at any point when my children are like, hey, mama, like, what's my summer reading schedule look like? And they're like, I want to read your and daddy's book. I'm like, not yet. You're not old enough. So the story I was going to share is on Sunday, I was approached by our pastor's daughter, who is 15, and she is been homeschooled. She's wildly intelligent. She takes classes over at the university, at Regent University. And so she's dual enrollment in college at 15 and homeschooled and just really wise, very mature. And she's like, your book has really caught my eye. And I really think that it's something the Lord is calling me to read. And I'm like, oh, I need to get your mom's permission before I give you this book, because this is like the nitty gritty, right? And so when I was processing that out with the Lord, I really was unsure of what details that I want to share about myself, my story, and what did I want to keep safe behind our family's curtain. I don't think that you being vulnerable means you air all of your dirty laundry. That's not what that means. So while there's this authenticity and vulnerability movement, and I am 100% for it, there are also, like Julianne mentioned, details that you can keep for yourself. But there is also an audience that is right and ripe to read your book, and they need you to share more than just the pretty painted picture. They need you to share the heartbreak. They need you to share the hurt. They need you to share some of the heavy that you had to carry. And that's what truly breaks chains for people. Because if we just want to paint and then we're happily married and renewed our vows at 10 years, that isn't helping. That's the highlight reel, right? So when you come alongside Fit Press, we walk these journeys with you. Sharia, who's not on camera, but I know is here listening, she was another person that was at that same writer's retreat that Rachel was at. And she's walked through some things. And it was really beautiful to witness how she wants to reveal her story in a really dynamic way that more people than just this particular trauma point would be connected to. But it really opens up the opportunity for healing, because she's also infusing a passion point, which is music. And so music is a universal love language. It allows people to come in, to feel safe, to see, like when you listen to any soundtrack and you're like, wow, I can really feel the angst in that person's song, right? It's like you want them to feel the angst in your story, but you also want there to be redemption to it. So I have not yet come to terms on whether I'm going to let that 15-year-old read that book yet or not. She is her own woman at this point, and she surely can. And I am so grateful my kids are still young enough that they don't have to. But I'll tell you, I was prepared for that. And I asked the Lord specifically in those writers' retreats, Lord, what do you want me to share? And it was a fear of mine to say, one day my kids are going to know this story. One day my kids are going to get married. And I want them to know that they're safe and they're protected from this particular trauma, because we've broken generational cycles. And so I get to stand on truth, I don't stand on my story. I stand on truth. And so I don't stand on top of my book and say, this is my story. I stand on top of the Bible and say, this is my story because it's his story. And I really hope that that breaks some chains for you guys today, because it's really important that we know what we're sharing, why we're sharing it, and how much we're sharing.
That's so good. And back to your point about what helps the audience, right, to see themselves in your story. I don't know many people that have had 4 babies at one time, right? I have one of those 1 in a million stories. And so, I heard, oh, if you have a 1 in a million story, that's actually not a good thing because not many people can relate to it. So what I had to be sure to speak on as I am explaining that 1 in a million type of experience is the emotions that people can relate to. People can relate to overwhelm. People can relate to capacity issues, right? And so again, helping you to identify the parts of your story that other people can relate to, even if they didn't have the exact same experience.
And Rachel wanted to piggyback on that one really quick before we move on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so I'm in the women's devotional and I have my own book coming out. And in the women's devotional, I really that was more where I did air my dirty laundry, but I had to think in the moment, what is my purpose behind sharing this? Was it shame? Was it blame? Was it me still not healed? Or did it serve a greater purpose for what I was sharing out? And so that was the lens I took on. Then in my bullying book, my daughter was the one ultimately bullied. So I had to ask her permission numerous times. Are you okay with me sharing this? And I do at the end, I have an afterword where she gets to share more that she wanted to. But I share in the book that when my daughter becomes of age and she wants to tell the rest of her story, she can. But we only used pieces of her story to give examples of things. And then on the flip side, she went to a Christian school that did a horrible job of keeping her safe. And so I had to be very careful never to say their names. But I do have a chapter on reaching out to the principal, reaching out to the supervisor, and I'm sharing in how to be a team and work together. And so I had to really think about what's the purpose and the reason for sharing and what is the ultimate goal I want them to get out of reading this. And if there wasn't, then I needed to take that out.
That's so good, Rachel. I'm glad you added that. Thank you. I was going to allude to one more thing that we didn't mention here, and it is about name dropping. And it's connected to the resource portion. So if you have a book that you want to reference, if you have a coach that you want to reference, if you have somebody's name that you want to reference that maybe they're famous, like so untouchable that you can't actually, like Stephen Furtick is in my book, Ron Carpenter, we're now close, but at the time we weren't, is in my book. There are different people that I've mentioned that were vital for my healing journey. And I want to point people to those experiences and experts because I wasn't an expert in that yet. Some of them I'm still not an expert in. And so I want to encourage you that those names are okay to put inside, and they're actually pretty pivotal when it comes to you releasing your book. Imagine being able to send a book and a thank you card with a tag inside of it. Julianne, I still haven't done this. Okay, so I need to do this for my book. But with a tag inside of it and sending this to their desk and saying, thank you for helping me heal. Thank you for what testimony you put out into the world so that my testimony could have completion. And so I just would really encourage you guys to consider that. Now, don't name drop through the whole book because that would just be bizarre. They're here to learn from you with purpose. But there's a couple of names in my book, and I did that intentionally.
Yeah. Yeah. Any public figure is considered free range.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you're open to use them in a story that you saw or anything like that. So again, those are things that we can help you navigate through.
And before we go on to the Q&A, or I guess this is a Q&A, go ahead, Julianne. There's a Q&A in the chat for you if you want to say it.
Oh.
From Lydia, she is asking, what is a beta reader and at what point is it helpful?
Oh, yes. Okay. So I remember when after I had my mom experience as my editor, I went and got a real editor. And I remember her saying, it's not ready for me yet. And I was like, what you mean? It's done. Here you go. And she was like, it's not ready for me yet. How many people have read it? And I was like, I mean, me and my mom, I've read it a lot. And so she was like, you need to at least have 5 pairs of eyes on your book, because again, a beta reader is a before, right? That's kind of what the beta theme is something that comes before, that allows you to kind of work out the kinks, understand where people are like, wait, that doesn't make sense to me. Wait, I thought this happened. Because so often when we're writing, and if we didn't lay out an organized storyboard and we didn't have all those tools and we're like, we're in flow, we're just going to do it, then when somebody is reading it, they are getting immersed in our story. And that's one thing I'm constantly telling authors too, is that you have the reader's attention. They're in it. They are sitting in that chair. You have invited them into this atmosphere that you've created through your words, and they're in it. Okay. And so to be able to expand upon what you're talking about, but so often what happens is, if, again, we don't have those tools in place to write cohesively, we can kind of jump around, because we often want to write how we are talking to people naturally in story. And so to be able to have somebody read it all the way through, they go, wait, you never finished this point, and I wanted to know about it, because we already know the end. We already know what's coming, but they don't yet, and they might have questions. And so for them to be able to kind of take notes as they go through and be like, okay, these are the things you didn't address that I wanted to know about, or could you expand more upon? Right. I had so many of my beta readers say, we want more of the quad stories. And I was like, really? Yeah, you're not sick of that yet. Because it's like, they're intense, so really you want more of that, but they did, because it was entertaining, and I was able to do it in a way that it was entertaining, even though I was like, through it. They weren't in that part of it, and so they got to see the finished part of it. And so again, it allowed me to understand like what the reader actually wants to know more about, because it's not just about you. Did you have more on that?
No, I think that's great. There are places for you to find beta readers as well, Lydia. There are whole communities that offer beta readers, beta reading. Some of them are completely free. Some of them you can find on Fiverr, which I did have great experience with my Fiverr beta readers. And they were as little as like $25 to read, because they're in another country, but you want to make sure that they're the right avatar, right? So be conscientious that the beta reader is the right avatar, and they're not just giving you random feedback or editing feedback, but they're actually coming at it with the heart of what you need. Additionally, sometimes it's just chapter by chapter. So Rachel has been a part of book launch teams where they're actually providing like, or not book launch, it's kind of a pre-launch team, not even the book launch team, where they're actually giving their audience an inside peek to the book before it actually comes to fruition. Another way that this is done, which I one day want to do, I think it's so cool. It's the way Lisa Turkers writes her books. She actually has focus groups, and every single like 2 to 3 chapters, she'll host a local focus group with 50 women. And she will actually read the book as she's going, and she will get on the spot feedback from those women. They will read the book and they will come in. She'll get on the spot feedback from those women based on that chapter, based on a topic, based on a question that she was pondering of like, does this land? Is this right? Is this not okay? So when she comes to a finale of her book, which her books are phenomenal if you've never read any of them, it actually is so profound, because she actually has gotten into the head of the reader. And you'll hear people say that like, gosh, she's literally reading my mail, right? She's right in my head. Well, yeah, she kind of is, because by that point she's been with 300 women who are probably very similar to you, who have shared in the conversation, who have shared in the development of said book. So that's also another way. There's obviously a lot more that goes into that. But it doesn't have to be 50 women in a group. It could be 5 women in your local community that you just, do a charcuterie board and have them come over and have them pre-read it. Like, people love experiences, and people want to be a part of things like this, especially as a Fit Press author, because you are turning a message into a movement. And so why not start the movement now? If you read my book, I do share something about the SMART-IST goals. The EST stands stands for evaluate. And this is evaluate what it is that you're writing, evaluate what it is that God's calling you to. Make sure it's discernment from the Lord. Next is to share it, which is what I wanted to say here, which is like the accountability piece. If you are writing a book or God has put it on your heart to write a book, you're showed up here. So right now you already shared it with me that I have to follow up with you in a couple of weeks, a month, a year, and say, hey, did you do the thing? Click, 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 tap, tap, tap that God told you to do. But share it with your community. Let them know, because what happens is you're actually seeding their hope, their excitement, their energy towards the mission, and you're also getting them curious. And so every time I would go on a writer's retreat, I would talk about what it is that I wrote. I had a pre-book launch team that actually journeyed that 3 years with me that I mentioned. And now there's hundreds of people inside of that group. And anytime I want to talk about the book and bring it back to life or have a birthday party, like I mentioned, they are in it because they literally remember when I was just like crying in a puddle over the thing that I was still healing about, because I was very vulnerable with that particular group. And so start that today if that's something that interests you. These are some really golden nuggets that I'm giving you that we do inside of our coaching programs. So I really hope that today was of service to you guys. Does anybody else have any additional questions or things that we didn't cover based on our initial conversation? Any other thoughts, struggles, concerns, or reflections? Man, I feel like it's so rare that we end on time. So this is a miracle, especially with all of us. All right, well, let me share a couple more things. If you do have any questions, just feel free to unmute or drop it into the chat. We have all of our author resources exist inside of our hub. So if you have yet to get into our app, it's called the Fit in Faith Network. It's an app. So if you have a Android or an iPhone, you can find it in the App Store and download that for free. There are a lot of additional free resources inside of that, but there's also a low entry point membership for $35 a month. You can get access to all of the previous recordings, or if you're unable to attend a virtual experience that happens technically it's the fourth Tuesday of every month at 10 a.m. We just got the calendar wrong, so it's the last Tuesday today, but the fourth Tuesday of every month at 10 a.m. But if you couldn't come to those, you would still get access to all of them, as well as all of the new trainings that we put in as a Fit Press team for those particular app members. Additionally is the Joyful Entrepreneur Volume 3. We mentioned that we have a couple more seats inside of that opportunity. Anthologies are the best stepping stone to writing and releasing your own book. And I don't just say that because we host them. I host them because I did it before I had a publishing house. This was literally how I got connected to podcasters and the beta readers and the book launch team members that I am talking about here that are now internal to our community. I was getting inside of other people's experiences. So we're busting myths, we're busting lies in this particular anthology. And if you're already feeling like I'm not a joyful entrepreneur, don't let the imposter syndrome, the lack of belief, get in the way of what God wants to do in and through you. And if you know that you also are going to come alongside us as an individual author, we are doing promotional opportunities in that regard. So you can have a follow-up conversation with us, and we'll end up doing something fun for you guys. I mentioned the virtual retreat. So if you are ready and you're like, Tamra, I want to do all of this right now. I want access to that organizational chart. I want to actually be able to sit and go through these thoughts and figure out cadence and understand rhythms and figure out your title or an organization of your chapters. You want to do a storyboard live. All of the things that we do in our 2.5-day in-person retreat, I do in a day and a half virtual retreat. So if you are interested in doing that sooner than later, we have full access to developing that in the next month. So let's get that on the books if that's something you're interested in. It's a lower investment than actually coming to the next retreat, which I mentioned before, which is in the Bahamas. It's likely going to be the second to last weekend in October, but we haven't confirmed those dates yet. So that is it for now. We are accepting authors for 2025 debut. Rachel will be one of those authors. We're so excited about it. Her book, do you have your exact drop date, Rachel?
No, it's
Okay.
looking at December, but no, we
Okay,
don't.
woo, 2024, let's go. All right, so hopefully she gets hers in before then, and then others are coming in right now for fall and winter of 2025. The Joyful Entrepreneur, if you got into that book, you'd be able to have your best-selling author before summer of 2025. Therefore, that's a standing ground for you to launch your book as already a best-selling author. That can be on your covers and on all of your marketing. It really gives you a new clout for how people look at your particular book. So we're excited to continue that conversation with any of you guys. I dropped a link in the chat, and you are welcome to book a call. If the only thing that's not on that list is the virtual writing retreat. And so you can just put joining Fit community or becoming a Fit Pressed author. Let me show you what that looks like really quick. If you haven't already filled one of these out in the past, it just has your name and information, and you can just do anthology or devotional if the joyful is something you're interested in, or becoming a Fit Pressed author, and you can type in virtual retreat as you are doing this. So you would say virtual, do you have a pot, all these other things. Make sense? Julian, is there anything else that I forgot that we're supposed
Tamra,
to
if
share
you'll
about?
just address Emma, she's talking about
Yes, would coming to the
the
conference be?
summer conference. I'm not sure.
Is this for She Speaks? Yes. Okay. So
Yes.
I mentioned Lisa on this, and I was thinking about She Speaks. She Speaks is a speaker and writer conference that's been happening for almost 25 years. I think they're on 24 years this year. And I am speaking on day 2 in the evening and doing a workshop all around the business ecosystem behind our book, which we do have training about inside of our hub. This is one of my favorite places that I got started as an author, but it was also the place that rejected me several times. So I have that place of like, oh, that was really hard, but I continue to go back and support what they're doing. We do a lot of myth busting around some of the language that's used at that particular event. So I do encourage you to be understanding. One of the things that they say often is that you need a bigger platform. Like until your platform is bigger, so just all they tell you to do is focus on your platform, focus on your platform. And that's not the process. It's focused on your work. Focus on your words, focus on the book, focus on what God is doing internally, and He will build a platform. And so that's something I'm really passionate about. But as far as connections and people that will be a part of your, maybe your endorsements, or people that might be in your book in writing the foreword, people on your podcast maybe, or you being on theirs, I love any opportunity to get in person with people. I highly suggest Fit Press will be there as a partner. And so we'll have a really cool booth that's we're working on, or excited to have it. Julianne will be there, and some of our other Fit Press team members.
Yeah, anytime you can get, in the room and get those pictures with, because you never know when you're going to be able to use those later on, right? In the marketing of your book and things like that. So, and yes, anytime that you are in our atmosphere, absolutely come, and we will have conversations. And Tamra, I did a podcast release the other day about how Tamra is different in that she sees people. And there's so many speakers that are just like, oh, hey, nice to meet you. Okay, thanks, bye. And they just keep going. And so that's one thing that I really love and respect about her. And so know that you will be fully seen when you come and visit with us, Emma.
And that is one of the cool things as well, is when you do become an author in Fit Press, anytime we have any sort of event or opportunity to speak, we are inviting everybody to come with us. This particular one, we're going to have a Fit Press author debut. So we're going to have an event inside of the event, and that will happen on Saturday night after the conference. And so all of our authors will be doing a meet and greet and signings if their books are available. And if they're not, they'll be signing something else, which will be a surprise that you'll get when you attend. And that will be open to the public, so it'll be free unless we decide to do it as like a paint night. But then you'll just be paying for the service of doing the paint after the book launch party. So we're always having fun. We just got this compliment at the last U.S. Christian Chamber of Commerce that we were the sponsors of, that we bring the fun. And I was like, yes, I love to be known for that. We will bring the fun.
Color. We brought all the color.
April could attest to that. We were like the explosion of fun at She Speaks last year.
Absolutely.
All right, you guys. Well, we love you so much. I want to pray over your books before we sign off. I'm so grateful to have you guys here today hanging out with you. Lord, we are beyond honored to just be here as agents to your good news, as agents to your love and your activation, God. You are a God that activates your children. You don't just leave us in the corner once we're healed to just stay there and then go on to the next, God. You continue to call us higher. You call us into yourself, Lord. And we know that writing is a journey to do that. It's a journey to get to know you and your story through our story. It's a journey to healing. It's a journey to serving, God. And you called us to be servants, that even your son Jesus came to serve, not to be served, God. And so we think about that when we think about our platform. It's not about us, God. It's about you. It's about the stages and the places and the microphones and the people. And it's ultimately about bringing people into heaven, God. If we bring the fun here on earth, Lord, we want to bring the fun into heaven. We want to have a party train coming in with Fit Press authors, Lord. And so we thank you for all of the people who just came to sit, Lord, and to learn and to process their own emotions and to realize that they're not alone in this journey, God. It's such an honor to be able to walk this out with people and to just be a supporter, to be a cheerleader, to be a warrior in the front lines with people who are willing to share their words with the world, God. It is a brave act to do this. And we know that it is not for the faint of heart. And so we know that you're in it because they wouldn't do it if you weren't in it because it's scary. And so we thank you that you say, fear not. You tell us to be brave and to be strong and to be courageous. And so we get to fight with these words of weapon because we stand on your truth, God, and that you are before all things. And so I just ask that in any relationship, in any area of writer's block, in any area that the enemy has a stronghold or a foothold in, their minds, their homes, their relationships, their hearts, God, that we would be able to stamp on that right now or literally be trampled on by your mighty angels, your warring angels. I just see them with the sword of the Spirit, God, just telling them the truth and getting the enemy out, God. They're not welcome in these safe havens. They're not welcome in the sanctuaries of their writing. They're not welcome in the ideation phase. They're not welcome in the creative space because they, and especially Satan, he is not a creative being. And so we ask that you would just protect them with the shoes of peace, the helmet of salvation, the breastplate of righteousness, the belt of truth, the sword of the Spirit, and the shield of faith. We dress in the armor, God, every single day as writers, warriors, as wordsmiths, and we just are your messengers. And so send us, God, send us into the places we've yet to go, our feet have yet to go, the trails that we have yet to blaze, Lord, because we know you're before us and we trust you enough to go. You send us, Lord, and we know that you're already there, so we don't have anything to worry about. We thank you for this time. We thank you for Julianne and her incredible just story to be able to share with us and her teaching ability. And for Rachel, God, we just ask for multiplication over top of the words that she has penned for so long and the story of her daughter and her and this process, God. We know that there is going to be multiplication on the other side and just exposure to what the enemy is doing when it comes to bullying, and that you are not a bully, Lord. You call us into unity. You call us into community, and that is what this place is. And so we thank you for the foundation of your truth and for your business plans that have preceded this particular call, Lord. We couldn't have made it up if we tried. We thank you, Lord. We glorify your name today and always. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.
Amen.
Love you guys so much. Thank you for being here.
Oh, and then we lost her. Thank you for coming. We love you. Bye-bye.
See you guys. I saw Sharea's heart at the end. So good. Great job. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you.
Appreciate you so much.